Welcome to Transforming 45, the podcast that celebrates the incredible power of passionate voices. I'm your host, Lisa Boat. Join me in conversation with heart-led humans who share their deeply personal stories of transformation. Transforming 45 is here to uplift, connect, and remind you it's never too late to write your next chapter. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Transforming 45. I am looking forward to a really beautiful conversation with the human who is here with us today. So I would like to welcome Dana Canneto to the show. Dana helps feminine visionaries, thought leaders, paradigm shifters, change makers, healers, and coaches who are looking for clarity on the next incarnation of their soul's purpose and ready to align with the sacred feminine leadership in a new way. As a woman who's been through her own rites of passage toward embodying her deep purpose and aligning with her sacred feminine, her deepest passion and greatest joy is watching the magic that unfolds when a woman steps into her embodied feminine presence. And at the time we're recording this, it is very close to Samhain or Halloween. And this always feels like such a deeply sacred time where I am really connected to my pagan and sacred divine roots. So I'm really glad to be having this conversation today. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Yeah. So tell me your story. How did you get to where you are today?
As we always know, our stories are so much longer than we actually think, but meaning I've always grown up just very insecure, sensitive, not really realizing it, I don't think, until I went on this journey, which really started, I would say, 2010. That was when my father, there was many mini awakenings throughout that, the time before that, body image stuff, anorexia, like health things that I incurred. And in 2010, after my father passed away, I'll never be able to explain it in words. It was just this energy that came over me. I was sitting on my couch looking out the window. When my father passed, it was one of the most grueling times of my life. I didn't realize it would impact me the way it did. And it's usually what happens with most of us, right? When we go on these awakenings, we have deep loss in our lives. And I just had this knowing that I was not living the life I was here to live in always, and mostly when it came to my purpose. And so it was like there was no bypassing the calling. I just went to seek it. And to make a very long story short, I thought I wanted to go into nutrition, and I found all these emails from the Institute of Integrative Nutrition and went to be a health coach and got certified in that because I had so many health issues. I think what really needed to happen was I needed to heal my body and reconnect to my body in a new way, in this holistic way that I never even fathomed was out there. Because that then led me into energy medicine and shamanism and Celtic shamanism and so many other modalities. But what really opened the doors for me was in 2017, after a 2-year, I want to say passage out to Colorado that I went for many months during this program and apprentice that I did, where I really just connected back to myself, and my main kind of proprietary methodology was created, and that is revival dance. And it's a sacred dance journey that I brought myself on, not realizing what I was doing at the time. And I remember being so timid going into it. And I was like, no one's around me. Why am I being so timid to move my body in this way, or to, put on this weird music that I never really, I was always a dancer when I'd go out to bars, but this is something different,
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because shamans, there's a kind of a famous saying out there that, when somebody comes to them with deep suffering, adversity, pain, a shaman would say, when was it that you stopped dancing? I just got the chills all over, because that's kind of what happened after my father passed. I lost myself, and really on this journey to purpose was just finding myself again. which is what I love helping women do. So now I see why it was such a grueling process that I went through. But yeah, that's a bit of my story.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
It is grief becomes, as we were talking, and I was thinking about a way to process it. I was like, grief almost becomes this incubator space where I've talked about it on the show a lot. My mom passed away when I was 30, and my two kiddos were very little at the time.
Yeah,
And she was only 52 and she was diagnosed with cancer it was a very traumatic time
of course.
in my life. It was just before I was heading back to, like, my youngest hadn't even turned 1 yet. So
Mm,
she died a month before I was supposed to head back to school after my maternity leave. And what I see it now as was really this incubator that is both, it's hard to talk about because in our culture we really try to push, death and grief away
mhm.
and look at it through a very narrow lens. So when I say it was both deeply like it was so painful but also a gift,
Yeah.
it absolutely was that for me.
Mhm. Yeah. I totally agree with you. And it's interesting. And I try to help, when usually when I work with them, there is that story, right? This
Mhm.
pivotal time in their life that they still haven't maybe healed from or gotten over. And it is a gift in essence. It doesn't feel like it at the time. But one thing I have acknowledged is this is gonna it's coming out, it always sounds morbid, but I don't mean it like, oh, it's a blessing that this person is no longer here, right? That's not all that I'm saying, but I have now since received the gifts that my father has given me since he's been on the other side, and I can feel them and hear him. And it's my life was very much he was like my idol. Like he was such an amazing human being to so many people and kids in our community. And because of that, and I didn't trust myself growing up, I constantly sought out advice from him. And I led a lot of my life based on what he told me. I had an idea around college and he was like, go do this. Okay, go do this. Now, this isn't everybody's path, right? But a lot of my core wounding was around self trust. And, everybody kind of has that different flavor. And I see that when I saw that in my journey, how much I sought validation and I sought advice from others, and I wasn't tuning into myself. And so, this kind of, as I say, rites of passage I've been on, and what I try to, I just am so passionate about talking about is like just that reconnection with the body and listening in because it's within us. But I was always so scared to not just hear it, but like, is this right? Like this anxiety mode, right? And don't get me wrong, there's moments, right? Because I'm very transparent about that too. Like, I'm not perfect. I don't always trust myself 100%, right? But it's just this invitation to trust and see what happens and what unfolds. So there's just always that gift, and it's finding the gift in the journey, in the grief.
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely understand your perspective. And it's very similar to mine as well, where my mom was this absolute force of nature. And in many ways, I lived in her shadow. And I'm not sure, actually, no, that's not true. I do know. I 100% know that I would not be on the path that I'm on now were she still living,
Mm,
because I was living a very different life at that point. And it was watching the way she exited this world actually that motivated me
mhm.
to really tune into my own self and my
Yeah,
own power.
yeah. I so
Yeah.
agree with that, and I think that's the beauty of it too. It's that, and then trusting to move forward with it, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
just not being afraid. Like, one of the big things it's like, yeah, sometimes it's hard, but it's much harder to stay where we are, and we just don't realize that until we move forward and see like, oh, this is life. This is life.
This is life.
Tasting
Yes.
it, being in that central experience of everything that you're being shown and given through the process, you know?
Yeah. And there's so much grounding in the work that you're doing around somatic
Mm,
reconnection,
mm,
because we can more easily stay I use the word easily. That's not the right word, but for lack of a better one at this point, it's easier to stay in that space when we're disconnected from our bodies,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's easier to stay. And that was another experience that I had through my grief journey, was realizing the way I exited my body, because
Yes.
I still remember like so clearly the day I came back in, and it
Mm-hmm.
was connected to music as well. And I was driving, I had picked my boys up from daycare and we were driving home, and a song came on the radio, and I actually heard it for the first time in months, and I started singing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in that actual sensory reconnection with my body where I went, whoa, I've been gone for
Mm-hmm.
months. I have not been
Yeah.
inhabiting this home.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I'm interested to hear about how that somatic reconnection happened for you.
Oh, I love this because I do remember this one very powerful experience. So what's so interesting to me, and this is why I always say like our purpose is like, and I use that word because it's the word, right? I
Yeah.
mean, we can look at purpose in so many ways, right? So when I look at what really lifted me up, what reconnected me always, it really was dance. Even though it was always out and in these other ways and forms, I feel like spirit was then inviting me like, now let's do this in this way, right? And so when I was actually away, and this apprentice that I was doing, or maybe at the time I was in the program, there was a lot of different I was doing wilderness walks and shamanic practices and sacred dance and really connecting with the goddess and the feminine. And I was in a room with 19 other women, and I wish I could remember the song. I don't. I think I was just lost in the experience of what was happening. And I literally, it was like the last day, it was the last day of that weekend. And I literally fell to the ground and just started crying that I wasn't upset. I couldn't, and I
Mhm.
have chills all over my body right now as I'm reliving this, but it was just this experience that I was having, that I'd been here before, that this wasn't new. And this isn't the first time I was with these women. This wasn't, and I was just accessing, I feel like, another dimension at that time, but it was just this embodied, again, something I can't even express in words, just this embodied feeling of being alive and being in my body. And that was when I already knew, I felt like I knew dance was like a part of it. I had no idea what it looked like. And revival dance didn't come till like a year later, in the shower, no less, buck naked. And I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, running out, and it wasn't even named yet. Like, that's the name that came in. My husband's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I gotta look this up. I gotta, So I feel like when it comes to music and when it comes to dance, especially for women, like we all have this very, like you're talking about, like the voice and the music and like we all have these ancient sacred feminine roots within us, and that's where we tune into, and when we get into the body and that sacred connection to source, and like this is us, this is who we are as women. I'm not saying men aren't. This is the feminine energy, right? But our intuition and is here. So when we have that reconnection and we feel the power of that, it's like you can't ignore that or not go back to it. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yes, it's one of the reasons why I find this work is so deeply powerful.
Mm.
It's, the conversation I have with my clients is there is energy in your body, right? It's electricity that makes your heart beat. Like there is actual measurable energy in your
Yeah.
body. And there is also the life force energy that is in your
Mm-hmm.
body. And if
Mm-hmm.
we are still, and if we are stagnant, and if we are disconnected, that energy just builds and
Yeah.
builds and builds. And I feel like it was our sacred feminine knowing
Mm-hmm.
before it was taken from us,
Mm-hmm.
that we
Absolutely.
knew moving our bodies was such an essential part of loving ourselves, of
Yes.
giving ourselves opportunity to hear ourselves, to move that energy and do it in a way that is joyful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I always said that I had this vision of, and maybe it'll come to fruition. I don't know. Right now, it's just not the time. But you know, I've asked women in the past. I'm like, how would you feel if you just had like this huge temple space that we can all go and do? Have sacred dance, have these different artists come in, because so much of dancing, for me at least growing up, was like in a bar or at a wedding, or it's like, can we just go and dance? And I'm not, negating that there's so many beautiful other things out there, journey dance and five rhythms. And I mean, there's so much access to those things, but where do we have a place that we could just like go commune, dance, and, it's like we
Mhm.
need more of that in the world. And I think that it would be such a healing place for women to come to, because I think also a lot of us, I can speak for myself at least, and I know a lot of women I work with relate to this, but there's that, the feminine wound that I think we're all tapping into too, and how we also treat ourselves because of this feminine wound. So having
Mhm.
that community to dance together and celebrate each other is, I think, pivotal.
Absolutely. I agree because as you're speaking, so I love dance. I
Mm,
love to watch dance. I love to it feels so powerful to me, and at the same time it is so hard for me to
mm,
just release and let go and let that rhythm move through my
mm,
body.
mhm,
And when you started talking about the feminine wound, I made that connection of course.
mm.
Of
Yeah,
course, it's still difficult for me to do that because I am still, it's still so deeply
yeah.
here, right?
Mhm.
It's literally here in my chest. Can you talk a little
Yeah.
bit more about how you experience the feminine wound?
Yes. So I would love to just touch on what you said at first, because I think
Hmm.
that's so common for women. And, when I had put Revival Dance out there, after a while, I changed the name because I didn't want women to feel intimidated that it's this, dance and they have to get up and dance in front of people. And a lot of the music that I use that I think helps is this. It's like activating. It's very shamanic. It's drumming. It's almost like you can listen to it a few times and you can't, like, it's almost like your body can't even not feel it, in that way. But um, I'm just naming that that is so common. That kind of fear of like, and that's how I was at first when I had stopped for a while. I'm like, what am I doing? I'm in my own home and I feel weird, like, and it's because I was so disconnected still from this part of me. When it comes to the feminine wound, it's funny that you say that you feel it in your chest, because I actually think that's common, and I feel it here. And I think the reason why is because well, it's the heart, right? So it's that deep pain, and it's also the shutdown, right? So we get shut down from this feminine wound, and I'm definitely like, I don't want to say a victim of it, but like we all have that, not all, right? I don't want to speak for everybody, but many of us, whether it's our mothers, our sisters, friends. And it's exactly what you said. Like I'm pausing because I'm feeling into it, but it's exactly what you said, where it's here and it's almost like that here.
Hmm.
It goes from like heart to voice, and you're cut. And and it's hard to show up in that. And I think so many people who are going this journey and wanting to step into their, I'm using air quotes here, of our purpose, whether that's your vocation, whether that's just who you be in your family, and really being who you truly are, that's where we stop ourselves because of it. Jealousy. We don't want to be too powerful, too beautiful, or disempowered because we can't be in our power around people, or maybe we have to be too much in our power. We can't be soft. It's like there's so many different flavors of it, and it's very sad because it still exists, and it's also something I'm very passionate about. So I can go on forever on that topic, but yeah,
Yeah. Well, and we can. I mean, not
yeah,
exactly forever,
yeah,
but we can talk
yeah,
about
yeah,
it for a long time because
yeah,
it's certainly, I mean, it's the theme of my journey as
yeah.
well, right?
Hmm.
Listeners will have heard me tell this story, but in my career,
Hmm.
I was very clearly told to be quiet.
Hmm.
That, something that a male colleague would say, if I
Hmm.
said it, it was
Hmm.
the feedback I got was, well, you're going to have to figure out a non-threatening way of saying that.
God, yeah.
Yeah. Or I had I had won an award and I gave a speech and someone, a male leader in my life at the time said, "Oh, your speech was so cute."
Ugh.
And
Yeah.
I am a lot of things. Cute is not one of them, nor have I ever been. And it is all of those little moments that we almost don't recognize as it's
Mhm.
happening because it
Mhm.
is so subtly cutting.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That just creates this energy within us
Mhm.
of, oh, that hurts.
Mhm.
Right? It is an energetic wound
Mhm.
that comes toward us. And so as humans, because we don't like pain, we start building up this wall around ourselves that looks like quiet stillness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I relate. And I definitely, I had that in the workplace. And I remember at the time, I I just remember crying and crying and crying because I took it so personally that something was wrong with me. And at the same time, I knew I was set up, that I got fired. Um, and because I became close with someone who was a little higher up and also
Mhm.
friends with this person, and this person happened to be my boss. And it's a long story, but I, it was a complete setup, and I questioned it for a little while until I received a letter a couple of years later, apologizing, not from that person, but from the person that had to be a part of it in order, but it's painful. It's really painful. And it's like, well, okay, but how am I supposed to succeed in the world if I am moving up and I'm taking initiative, which is what I was doing with this person, taking initiative, being more in my power, which I thought was a positive thing, which then triggered someone in power. And right. So it's like you can do no wrong. Step it up. But then if you step it up, nope, that's too intimidating. It's time to step down. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a tricky world to navigate in this. And I guess it just boils down to always just coming back to self. Once you recognize and realize that what might be happening inside is that wound, you know?
Mhm. Absolutely. And your story is my story. And
Yeah.
so if your story is my story, then our story is everyone's story.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
I also certainly remember a time I was in the bathroom and crying at work.
No.
I was in a stall
Yeah.
in the bathroom and I was just sobbing. And I still remember someone came in and they just were like, are you okay? Those are moments of, I don't want to leave you here because you clearly are in distress, but nobody knows what to do with a woman who's crying in the bathroom.
Right. Right.
And in that, at the same time, much like with grief,
Mhm.
because it was a grief process,
Yeah.
that was a turning point moment for me where I realized this role I have been playing for the last, it was about 18 years at that point, it doesn't fit me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And both the system and myself are showing me that very clearly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so as painful as it is, I think there is a movement or there is a shifting that is happening at this point,
Mm-hmm.
particularly for women or female identifying people who are starting to move out of those very patriarchal structures and
Yeah.
make systems that work for them.
Yes. Yes. I just literally, it's will be posted today. It's not yet, but I literally just wrote a little story about this of, my journey. And this is for anyone who is on this passage of really wanting to speak more outwardly. And again, I'm always transparent where I am at in my journey because I think it's important that we show up, and nobody's perfect here, right? We're always evolving. No one's at a place where they got it all together, right? And I just did a post about that today around when I went to Omega Institute in New York with my husband, and I had the opportunity to, it's a very prominent spiritual teacher out there. And I had the opportunity to ask a question. And I remember just shaking and saying, how do I show up fully as who I am with what I know I'm here to do in the world and not get persecuted, like literally and figuratively. And I remember like feeling my voice trembling, just even asking the questions. There was a room full of people in this weekend retreat. And he just looked at me straight at the eyes and he says, you're a systems buster. And at first that those words didn't like, I'm like, what? Because like that's not words I would use. And in my body, I was like, he got me like in a second, because like I said, I'm here to be a paradigm shifter. And in the post I was writing today was like, so I had some revelations. The energies have been crazy, especially I'm all Libra, Scorpio, Sag in my chart. So like these 3 months are just like insane for me.
Yeah.
And just going through the eclipse, oh my God, and just so much. And I had this awareness that I'm still not saying everything I want to say. And that so many of us are like holding back in what we really want to say. And I'm like, I'm going through my next level, my incarnation of like, nope, it's not about me anymore. Like, say what you got to say. Don't just do it in your small little Facebook group or your, like, claim it from the rooftops. And, this is for humanity, not for our, it's for us, right? But it's not about us. It's about what do we stand for. And, so yes, it's just that rocking the boat, because we need to at this time. We need to shake the system up. It's not conducive, as we can see what's going on in the world. And that's just a mere reflection of what's going on with each of us individually. Not every single one of us, but right. It's like the combination, the culmination. So yeah.
Stay tuned for more Transforming 45 after this short break. Okay. I want to come back to what you talked about being a systems buster.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a really beautiful intersection between the work that you're doing and being exactly that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we're having this conversation, right? Like I am also a systems buster. I was always trying to find ways to make change in a system that was never going to change.
Yeah.
But as we see it happening globally on all kinds of fronts.
Yeah.
All of the structures that we have put into place are crumbling before our very eyes,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is, as again, in our humanness, it's really hard on our central nervous systems,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's why we are in this place of fear response to everything, because that's what our brains are wired to do in this moment. And so hearing and seeing so many people coming out of these systems and saying, like actually shining the light. And like you said, saying the thing out loud of that system is from another time and is no longer in service to the humans who are on this planet.
Yeah.
And I think that the structure that you are creating around movement is such a beautiful, gentle way of showing just how surreptitious that can be. Does that make sense?
Yeah. When you say surreptitious, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, because when people hear things like dance or
Yeah.
music or, all of those things, they think of it as being this,
Oh. Oh.
extra. Yeah.
Yeah.
Airy
Yeah.
fairy, it's extra in
Yeah.
life. It's not something that we actually need to survive.
Right.
But that is not the truth.
No.
And that is why when you come in on that angle, it's like you can come in sort of on a way that people don't even see you until you're able to make them feel just how necessary that is to life.
Yeah. I'm so glad you're saying this, because I feel like a part of my mission too, and my message is that there's no separation between the mundane and spirituality. There's no separation between beauty and spirituality, and money and spirituality, and all these 3D like material, ways that we're here to live. But going back, I mean, historically, right? Like dance was such a prominent thing that people did in ceremonies, sacred ceremonies, in, even religious ceremonies, or in celebrations. Or the way I also look at the dance that I created and facilitated, and, women do it in their own space. Together when I do workshops or retreats and things like that. But when it comes to dance, it's not like, I would say I'm not a dancer by trade, I'm a dancer by essence, right? And also when we look at dance, we don't it's not it doesn't have to look a certain way. When we look at the definition of dance, it's how our body moves rhythmically. So think about how our emotions are moving and our thoughts are moving, and it's almost like that's normal. It's normalizing now this movement, this sacred movement of dance in a way that allows us to release. I mean, it's such a powerful release. It allows us to ground in our body. And now some people might say, for me, dancing takes me out. It also depends on your intention going into it, right? So if we're going into a movement, and again with this dance, and I always say to women, like, it might not look like dance in the moment. You might be crawling on the floor, you might be, and it's, for the way I look at it, for these women and even men, if they choose, there's lots of men that do different, like, journey dance and things like that, right? I just happen to work a lot with women, so I'm not excluding either or. But it's a way that we can this is survival. It's a way that we can reconnect back to the body, just like exercise, just like running, just like walking, and getting to know what's stirring inside, because that's when we start to have imprints. At least for myself and the women that do it, it's just like they have imprints of who they are. They remember who they are. It's a dance of remembrance. So yeah, I hope that answers the question. But yes, it might seem different, right, to some who are used to the more just meditation. And I will say this about meditation: I love meditation, but a lot of people, it's like they have a hard time with it. Your meditation might not be sitting meditation. I know a lot of spiritual teachers, even myself, sometimes I can't always meditate sitting, and I have to move. And sometimes dance is literally just like swaying to music, moving. When we move our body, we move the emotions. And Tony Robbins says this a lot. It's like it's like when we change our physiology, we change our mindset, we change everything. It's like that snap. So
Yeah.
there's so many avenues I can go with this, but it's the first things that
Yeah.
came up.
Which is what makes it so exciting, right? That there are so many ways that it can be expressed,
Mm-hmm.
and the way it is in everyone's lives. And when you were talking about meditation,
Mm-hmm.
what it made me think of is, more than anything, it is helping you know yourself and know your body. So
Truly.
as we start peeling back the layers of everything, and peeling back yet again, peeling back the structures. So the structure around that says what meditation has to look like.
Mm-hmm.
The intention of meditation is for you to go inside of yourself and listen to yourself, and build that sense of self-trust. And so
Yes.
if your body is saying to you, meditation looks for you like movement,
Yes.
then that's the answer.
And that's the paradigm shifting, right?
Yes.
Nothing has to look the way it did. And that's, I asked, I also did a Facebook Live this morning on this whole topic of, like, let's start redefining everything. Why are everything's so defined in a certain way? And I'm like, no more of that. What does this mean for you? And that's what matters. What do you value? And that's what matters. And I love what you're saying about coming back to the body, and we get to tune into what's going on. Because even in, like, the actual first program, because I weave revival dance throughout a lot of my programs, but the first program that was created was the core of it. And the first portal that we go through is reawaken. And
Mm-hmm.
it's activating a reawakening in you as to what's stirring, what's being called forth, what do you need to know, and so it's exactly what you're saying, because we start to, like, receive once we are able to tune in such a beautiful way to, what do I want? How do I want
Mm-hmm.
to, like, live life? How do I want to be expressed? And we forget that, especially as we get older and we're just such in our shackles of should and confines of conditioning and all the things that we're like, it's all right. The wild woman is coming out and she's ready to be free. No more good girl. No more people pleasing, you know?
Yeah, I love that. I know the architect archetype of the wild woman
Mhm.
is so fraught, right, in so many
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love it because when I think of the wild woman, I am reconnected to my ancestral roots of
Yeah.
women who were leaders, who stood in their power, who were the heart of communities. And it was their wildness
Yeah.
that led them, right? It was their wildness that built these communities. And
Mhm.
then in the it was their wildness also that was dangerous.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I feel like a big part of the work that we are engaging in right now
Mhm.
is releasing the energy of danger around
Yes.
that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Because I feel like, how do I say this to make sense? I almost feel like it's more dangerous not to,
Mhm.
because we're putting ourselves in danger when we're not being who we truly are emotionally. I mean, I can think of many moments where I didn't trust myself. I didn't break out of my fear. I didn't, and I'm just beating myself up. I'm in my head. People are stepping on me. It's like, because I'm allowing it. When we can, but it takes, I want to say this too. It's not just like, okay, I'm going to step into my wild wound, right? Like it takes a lot of shedding of old stuff, to be able to even, like, I kind of look at the passage, even, from what I've seen with women, it's like they come and enter this work. It's like the awakening of the wild woman.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden they wake up and they step into this kind of more priestess air, right? Of like, oh, I'm embodying my spirituality and I'm owning my power. And then it's like the empress awaken. You know what I mean? It's like this transition, this transgression, but it's like, it's not the wild woman, I think too. It's like that, when we think of wild, it's primal. It's not danger, because we're so associated. That's like the English language too. There's so many words that I've started to look up, even through, I love etymology, and
Mhm.
like, uh even wealth, right? Which is so crazy. It really is not just about money. If you look up, it's about actually health. It stems from health. And anyway, I'm going on a tangent here, but it's like there's so many attachments that we have to certain words, and wild is one of them. And it's really more so, no, we're just being asked to be in the wild, to be connected to nature, to earth, to the rhythms of our body. We are so in alignment with the moon. I mean, come on, like, with
Yes.
our cycles and the ocean, and how, like, you know, how much more validation do we need? That we need to
Mhm.
get back to that primal, wild root of ourselves and be
Yeah,
free.
absolutely. And it just along that same vein, when I was still in education, I always wanted to do a study on how wind impacts humans.
Oh,
Because on days that were really windy, which is
hmm,
high amounts of energy, right? High amounts of
hmm,
planetary energy, and that's the wind. Kids were out of their minds. And always, if I looked out
funny.
the window and it was windy, I knew we
Yeah,
were going to be in for it that day.
yeah.
And it also impacts the adults. Like if we let ourselves, but because we are so disconnected and shut off, and we're like, no, I just
Hmm.
have to deal with this. But if we were to let that wild energy be, and instead of trying to do the opposite of what that energy is asking us to do, right? So
Hmm.
in that like very concrete example, kids are wild when there's lots of energy, and we're
Hmm.
still asking them to be quiet and sit still and be small.
Yeah.
Where if we were to lean into that energy and say, you know what? Yeah, let's go outside. Let's have this experience. Let's figure out what is happening with the wind. What do you
Mhm.
feel? What is coming up for you? It
Yeah.
is the what you were saying of that, like it's that wild idea,
Mhm.
but it is the truth of who we are as humans, and it is the
Yeah.
resistance that we create for ourselves in pushing against what are our natural instincts.
Mhm. God, I love what you're saying. It just brings me back to the idea of, like, even when we're children, right? Like what you're saying is, when I, like, a kid has some burst of energy and starts running around, and like they're yelled at. to stop,
Mhm.
to instead, right? Like, okay, let's let you out. I'll let you out. Like the dog, right? Like, I'll let
Yeah.
you out for like, let's go in the backyard. Let's release. Let's kind of scream, do what you need to do. Because obviously, yeah, there's something going on there, right? And the other thing around the wind, you brought me back to a memory again in Colorado when we were in this temple space, and this mountain in Colorado is beautiful. And each one of them, we'd go around and counsel, and each one of us would share. And when maybe it was like we just went through an experience or an exercise or something. And when somebody would share something like so powerfully amazing and they're laughing, like literally no joke, like a hummingbird would go by, right? And then somebody would speak about something else and they're just like, oh, like in their raw, vulnerable, all of a sudden a cloud would come and it's like the wind would go. Like it was amazing what we witnessed, and the whole place with windows outside every time a woman shared. So there's something so real and so true about this connection and the mirroring. And that's why I always like, I don't know if you've ever done a medicine walk, but that's like powerful, just going out and receiving, if you're looking for answers, right? Receiving from nature what it's here to tell you, because there's just so much of that available to us. And we forget,
Yeah.
you
I,
know.
I did. That's how I started my day today. So I
Mm,
was I was at the lake this morning, and that's exactly what I did. I started out with the intention of show me the signs that I need for today. And as I was coming around the corner, actually, I noticed it on my way back, right
mm,
where I'd asked the question of, could you show me a sign? When I was coming back around the other way, and our landscape right now is, I love it in its starkness, but the leaves have
mhm.
fallen from the trees, and
Okay. Yeah.
it's, decay is in the air, and it just, for me, it feels really sacred. But as I came around this corner where I'd asked the question of, please send me a sign, there was this sprout of beautifully vibrant yellow flowers in the
Oh,
midst of this gray landscape. And when we let ourselves be open, and paying attention requires us to be in our bodies,
yes. Yes,
right?
absolutely. The presence. Yeah. Do you mind me asking you, what did the yellow
Yeah.
flower mean for you?
Well, for me, it just was I am early on in my entrepreneurial work, right?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
my question almost always is, I'm doing the right thing, right? Like
Yeah.
this is all going to be okay, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so that was my question again this morning, even though I sometimes feel like my guides are like, can you stop asking that question? Like, seriously,
No.
we've
Yeah.
answered it 1,000 times.
Yeah.
Like, look at the things that are happening in your life. You're good.
Yeah.
You're fine.
That's so
But
funny.
yeah.
It's so funny because I asked for a sign on something on Saturday. I was really struggling with a decision. And I think it was all the energies that was going on too. Like I was really like, do I do this thing? Do I not do this thing? Why am I so, and like I got the clearest sign ever. Right. And then the next day I still went in that like, oh, I should have, oh, that's right. I couldn't like there was an actual
Mhm.
obstacle that like stopped me from it, but there probably was a way around it, but it would have been really difficult. Right. And then the next day I'm like, well, I don't know. Give me another sign that was actually that did I create that to happen, or was that an actual sign? Like it's so funny how we can do this to ourselves. And then
Yeah.
like the next day my a friend of mine had texted me something because it was about going to this place, um and anyway, a sign came through so clearly, and I'm like, oh god, you're probably like, you know what, already, like, here's
Yeah.
another bone. It is really funny. Yeah.
I think it's important that you bring that up though, because we still, even though we are, when we reawaken and we are more connected to to energy, and we are more connected to our divine and the source, we still are human, right? We're
Sure.
still
Yeah.
in this human skin having this human experience. And so doubt will always creep in. And I
Yeah.
feel like that gets in the way for some people,
Yeah.
where they feel like a spiritual awakening or healing is a destination. I'm like,
Right.
no, sister, you're human. It's never going to be a
Right.
destination. It's
Right.
always going to be the journey.
There's always the evolution. Yeah. And I love that you just named that too, because it's like we can say in those moments of like, oh, okay, yeah, that's my human coming in. Okay, what do you need, human? Right? It's
Mhm.
like this is a big thing around feminine, energy, is that idea of compassion and being really devoted to self in that, and offering that compassion, because we can beat ourselves up, and I'm guilty of it. Right. And I still have moments, and I'm just like, at least I have the tools, and I know, okay, I know where that's coming from. I know whose voices that is. I know, and it's just really always inner parenting, self kind of stalking yourself, like where your emotions are, what do you need in that moment. And I think it's so important, because in those moments we could drive ourselves crazy if we're just like, constantly questioning or not trusting ourselves and seeking outside validation, which there's nothing wrong with seeking outside validation, as long as where you're seeking it, the power is still over in your hands. It's a big
Yes.
thing that I really stand for, because there's too much of that out there, you know?
Yes, absolutely. I completely agree. I think that is so important that, yeah. And again, it goes back to our humanness, right? There
Yeah.
are elements that we need as humans, and
Hmm.
connection is one of them.
Yeah.
And so, but it is in that external validation that making sure that it's still, that we still feel it,
Hmm.
right? Like if
Yes.
someone is externally validating us, and I'm putting all of my stock in that person's opinion, but I'm not actually feeling it, that's
Hmm.
when I know that there's a disconnect that's happening
For
there. That no
sure.
matter what anybody else says, if I don't feel it in myself,
Yep.
then I need to keep doing the work and digging to find out what's at the bottom of that.
Absolutely. You're just reminding me that maybe I'll repost this somewhere else. But this was a big thing that I wrote about, when it comes to validation. Is like, let's redefine this idea when people say, like, that, you're in an argument, like, why do you need to be validated? Why do you always need to be validated? Or, and it's like, that is a human need, but not when it comes too far that we're always seeking validation. But sometimes we need that reflection, especially women to women. I see your power, I see your medicine, or like, I feel like when I'm working with a woman, of like, because she's in that place of not trusting herself fully. And I'll help
Mhm.
her validate, but I will always say, does that feel right for you? Because this might be what I see, or if I'm intuiting or something. But it's always like, yes, handing that power over, making sure it feels right for you when you're needing validation in that moment, but not from a place of always needing. Because then there comes that time that we have to then grow into trusting, okay, like, I've been validated enough around this. Like, I think, like, I got it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I really love the way you framed that of handing them the power back. Like, yes,
Mm,
I can give you a reflection, because I
right.
was just recently having this conversation with a client around, it's really hard to see from inside, right? It's that forest for the trees. When you are in it and you are surrounded by whatever it is that you are working through, it can be really difficult to see the broader perspective. And
Hmm.
that's where that connection and community with other humans is so powerful, because we have a different perspective, literally.
Hmm.
And so we can, if you ask me, I can provide you for this other perspective, but I'm always going to hand the power back to you. And I think that's a really key statement. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, no, you're welcome. I know that I've been in circles, and there's no judgment here when I say this. I just know that I've been in programs and situations to where, I didn't have that, and I wasn't in a very empowered state, and I did give my power away.
Mhm.
And we can say all the time, she took my power, he took my power, they took my power. And really what's happening is we're letting it. And no shame or blame. I was in a very vulnerable place, and it was a very sticky situation that, to be very honest with you, was probably one of my biggest, darkest, deepest soul moments that lasted beyond a year. And it was took layers and layers to unravel from. And I know that there are people out there, because I have conversations with women who don't sign up for things because they're in fear of what they have went through, where they felt disempowered or lost their power or didn't get what they were promised or whatnot. And it's like, it's part of the journey, unfortunately, because it
Mhm.
is out there and we can't avoid it. And it's just learning and being tuned into your body, trusting your intuition, because that's where I didn't trust my intuition in this instance, and just following those cosmic breadcrumbs and being in a space of discernment. Like, Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and discernment is so important and so powerful. And it is those moments of, having to have the experience, right? This is resonating a lot for me because I recently, my husband and I went for a little weekend away, and part of it was going to, we just happened to be driving through the town where I went to university. And early on in my university years, I was in a relationship that was very toxic for many, many reasons. And I lived in that space for a long time afterwards of I let him take my power.
Mm.
And there's so much that's the place where we are not sending love to ourselves, right?
Yeah.
When we're like, oh, because we're being so hard on ourselves of saying, why did I let him take my power?
Yeah.
And I ran into him at a conference many years later, and it was a real shock because I was not anticipating seeing this human.
Hmm.
And in the moment, he saw me, and we, did the initial small talk, and then he said, I want you to know that it has always been on my mind. I always said to myself, if I ever did run into you somewhere, I wanted to apologize to you
Mm.
for the way I treated you.
Mm.
And I let him off the hook in the moment because I just was so overwhelmed that this was happening. I was like, oh, we're kids. It was fine, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But I let myself sit with that experience and realize that was not at all what I wanted to say. And
Hmm.
so it was that process of discernment. And so I went back to him and I said, actually, can we talk?
Mm.
And we went and we found a place to sit, and we talked and I said, what I do, and I need to thank you as well, because you showed me what I would never, ever accept for myself again.
Yes.
And in that moment, I took my power back and
Yeah.
realized, yes, I had given away, but now I have taken that back.
Ugh, I love that. And again, you're like so on, like I literally, like, so I just went through an experience myself, and I just posted about this too. And it was about, and we were going through a Libra season. So I was like, this is a big thing for me when it comes to relationships, because there's a space that we can be in, and we can be in discernment around self-worth versus self-blame. And we
Yes.
can say, well, was this me? Like, so something kept happening in a relationship of mine, and I kept saying, this must be me, right? We can, all these thought forms out there, right? Like you create your reality. I do believe that. Like you're a reflection of the person you're like, yeah, there's also like the middle ground too. We have to
Mhm.
be really, and when, if you're listening to this and you're on the spiritual journey, we can get very serious about it, very hard on ourselves, and always trying to fix ourselves and never giving the other person like, a kind of little slap that like, no, that's
Yeah.
you. Right.
Mhm.
And so I realized that as these things were happening, I kept, as much as it would make me angry, I kept blaming myself. Like I must be such a horrible person. And then it came a time when, like you said, this last time it happened, I felt the power of my self-worth in that moment
Mhm.
of I see what's happening. Like this is an invitation for me. And believe me, I didn't even need an invitation. In that moment, I was like, no, like this isn't even, and this is like a year later after the initial one happened. But um, so obviously I was maybe already there, but this really showed me that we do have to kind of be in that discernment of making sure that we are not taking on blame for other people's actions, and that you're in your power around it and giving yourself space and time to process. Because I needed a few days before I could either even have a conversation like about the situation. Like they knew that. I was like, I can't really even communicate with you right now. And I'm going through my own process around it. And so we deserve that.
Yes,
And
we
it's
do.
feeling in the body. It's tuning in. What's happening for me right now? Oh, I see. Like I am not available for this anymore. And I'm putting my foot in the ground.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, going back to the beginning of our conversation, that is again where we can use that tool of dance to
Yes.
move through and heal that energy.
Yeah.
And so although we could probably talk forever,
I know.
just to wrap up, what is the shift that you see in women who come into your dance work and dance
Yeah.
community?
Well, I will say this. There are like, several ways that I work with women. Dance is one of them. It's a big,
Hmm.
huge component of those women that are coming in. They're on that sort of awakening spiritually, whatnot. Maybe they're already in their business and they're like, what is the next incarnation? And so there's like different levels, but the other ways that I work with women is doing, shamanic immersions, they're called, that I tap into energies and my guides, and I tap into that sacred feminine and get, imprints and stuff of what they need to know, again, handing the power back to them. But in any experience, whether it's a dance or within these immersions, because there is a movement meditation that I give them prior. Oh God, I'm just going to do this like a list, if that's okay,
Yeah,
because
please.
it's like you talk about niche, right? And for
Hmm.
a while I struggled with that. And then I realized, oh, it is purpose, because these women are coming back and they're remembering who they are, whether they use it in their vacation, which so many of them do. They leave their jobs and, or it's just who they be in their relationship. There is a sense of empowerment that takes place. And I've heard from women who even reach back out, like, you will never believe, I found the love of my life after
Hmm.
having years and years of disharmony in relationships. So we're cutting the cords too when we do this from ancestral stuff that we're carrying around. So there's ancestral healing that takes place. So in all, when they come out of these experiences, it's empowerment within their relationships, it's self-worth, it's discovering oftentimes their medicine, their purpose, their calling. So it's almost like what your calling is, what your purpose and path is, it's going to happen with the intention coming into it, because you are with yourself in the sacred dance in this experience. And what
Yes.
unfolds is what you come in wanting. That's the best way to explain it.
Yes. And that makes perfect sense. And
Yeah.
I can feel that is such a beautifully holistic modality for
Mm,
doing that reconnection work. So
yeah.
thank you for sharing your medicine with
Yeah.
us today. I'm very grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me on this transformative journey. Your support means the world. If you resonated with our conversation and want to uplift the Transforming 45 community, here's what you can do. Connect with me about how you can reclaim your own magic. Check the show notes for all the ways you can find me. Subscribe and share. Hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And if you found value here, share it with friends, family, and anyone seeking inspiration. Leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your words can make a significant impact and help others find their way to these transformative stories. Join the conversation on social media platforms. Follow us on Instagram @lboat. You can also find me on Facebook and TikTok. And if you know someone whose story could inspire others, reach out and let me know. I love connecting with diverse voices that carry the power to transform lives. Remember, your support fuels my mission to share authentic stories of transformation. Thank you for being part of the Transforming 45 family. Until next time, keep shining your light and embracing your journey.
Electric acid.